Welcome to Afro Think Tank University. Today's lesson is about to begin, so get ready to learn something new. Let's dive in. Welcome to Afro Think Tank University, Science section. Today, we're beginning a journey into one of the greatest mysteries in the universe, the human brain. For centuries, people have wondered how our thoughts, memories, emotions, and movements are created. Now scientists have developed tiny devices that may help us understand the brain in ways once thought impossible. Before we learn how they work, Amari and Zuri are asking the same questions that scientists asked when this incredible research first began. Dialogue. Amari, Zuri, think about this for a second. Every memory you've ever made, every song you've ever learned, every face you've ever recognized, every dream you've ever had, all of it happened inside your brain. Zuri, when you say it like that, it's almost impossible to believe. The brain doesn't look that big, but somehow it stores an entire lifetime of experiences. That's incredible. Amari, exactly. Scientists often call the human brain one of the most complex objects in the known universe. It controls everything we do without us even thinking about it. Right now, it's controlling our breathing, our heartbeat, our vision, and even helping us understand this conversation. Zuri, and the amazing part is that all of that happens because billions of tiny brain cells are constantly sending electrical signals to one another. We can't see those signals with our own eyes, but they're happening every single second. Amari, that brings us to today's lesson. Imagine if scientists built something so incredibly small that it could detect those electrical signals while the brain is still working. Zuri, wait, are you saying there are actually devices small enough to fit inside the brain and listen to neurons communicating? Amari, that's exactly what researchers are working on. These tiny brain probes are thinner than a human hair, yet they're designed to record the electrical activity of neurons with remarkable precision. Zuri, that almost sounds like science fiction. If scientists can understand those signals, could they eventually help people who have lost the ability to move, speak, or communicate? Amari, that's one of the biggest reasons this research is so important. But before we jump ahead, we need to understand a more basic question. Zuri, what exactly is a neuron? And how can something smaller than a human hair interact with one of the most complicated organs ever studied? Amari, those are the questions we're going to answer together, one step at a time. To understand how brain probes work, Amari and Zuri first need to understand the language of the brain itself. Every thought, memory, movement, and emotion begins with tiny cells called neurons. These remarkable cells constantly communicate with one another using electrical and chemical signals, forming one of the most sophisticated communication networks in the known universe. Dialogue. Amari, now I understand why scientists study neurons before they build brain probes. If you don't understand the language of the brain, you can't build technology that communicates with it. Zuri, exactly. A neuron is like a tiny messenger. It receives information, processes it, and then sends electrical signals to other neurons. But here's what's amazing. One neuron doesn't work by itself. Amari, right. It connects with thousands of other neurons. And when billions of neurons are all communicating at the same time, that's what allows us to think, learn, remember, and even imagine the future. Zuri, think about what your brain is doing right now. It's helping you hear these words, recognize our voices, remember things you've learned before, and decide what each sentence means, all at the same time. Amari, that's incredible. We don't even notice it because our brains work so fast. It's like the world's most advanced supercomputer, except it runs on living cells instead of computer chips. Zuri, scientists estimate that the human brain contains around 86 billion neurons. Every second, those neurons send millions of electrical messages throughout the brain and nervous system. Amari, so when I decide to raise my hand, my brain sends electrical signals through neurons down my spinal cord into my arm muscles, and my hand moves almost instantly. Zuri, exactly. And the same thing happens when you smile, read a book, solve a math problem, ride a bicycle, or remember your favorite song. Amari, now I'm beginning to understand why brain probes are so difficult to build. Scientists aren't just trying to study one cell, they're trying to observe billions of cells that are all communicating at incredible speeds. Zuri, and that's what makes this research so exciting. If scientists can safely understand those electrical signals, they may discover new ways to help people whose brains or nervous systems have been injured by disease or accidents. Amari, so before we can understand the tiny brain probes, we first have to appreciate the incredible organ they're designed to study, the human brain itself. Now that Amari and Zuri understand how neurons communicate, a new mystery appears. How do engineers build a device delicate enough to interact with the brain without causing significant damage? Today's lesson shifts from biology to engineering, revealing how innovation, precision, and teamwork make this remarkable technology possible. Dialogue. Amari, when I first heard the phrase brain probe, I imagined something big, almost like a metal needle. But after learning more, I realized these devices are unbelievably small. Zuri, that's because they have to be. If the probes were too thick or too rigid, they could damage healthy brain tissue. Engineers had to design something incredibly thin, flexible, and strong at the same time. Amari, that sounds almost impossible. Usually when you make something thinner, it becomes weaker. Zuri, exactly. That's why scientists had to develop new materials. They use advanced polymers, microscopic electrical conductors, and specialized manufacturing techniques that let the probes bend slightly while still carrying electrical signals. Amari, so this isn't just a neuroscience project, it's also a material science project, an engineering project, a robotics project, and even a computer science project. Zuri, that's one of the coolest things about modern science. The biggest breakthroughs almost never come from one field alone. They happen when experts from many different disciplines work together. Amari, I also noticed that robots play a huge role. No human hand is steady enough to place something that's only a fraction of the width of a human hair with perfect accuracy. Zuri, right. The robotic systems can make microscopic movements far more precisely than a surgeon's hand alone. That precision helps scientists position the probes while reducing the risk of unnecessary injury to surrounding tissue. Amari, so every part of this process has to be incredibly accurate, from designing the probe to manufacturing it to inserting it and finally recording the brain's electrical activity. Zuri, exactly. It's a reminder that scientific breakthroughs don't happen overnight. Behind every amazing invention are years of research, thousands of experiments, and teams of people solving one small problem after another. Amari, the more I learn, the more I realize that these tiny probes represent something much bigger than technology. They represent human curiosity, determination, and the belief that even the hardest medical challenges can one day be solved. Amari and Zuri have learned that brain probes are incredibly small and carefully engineered. But one fascinating question still remains. How can a tiny probe hear the brain's electrical language? The answer lies in understanding that neurons communicate using electricity, and with the right technology, those signals can be detected, recorded, and translated into information scientists can study. Dialogue. Amari. So we've learned that neurons are constantly sending electrical signals to each other. But here's what I'm still trying to understand. If those signals are so incredibly tiny, how can a brain probe possibly detect them? Zuri, think of it this way. Imagine you're standing outside during a thunderstorm. Your ears can hear a loud clap of thunder because it's a powerful sound wave. Now imagine trying to hear the flap of a butterfly's wings from across a football field. That's much closer to what scientists are dealing with inside the brain. Amari, so the electrical signals inside neurons are incredibly weak? Zuri, exactly. They're measured in millionths of a volt. They're far too small for humans to notice directly, but specially designed electrodes on the brain probe are sensitive enough to detect those tiny changes in electrical activity. Amari, that's amazing. So the probe isn't reading someone's thoughts like science fiction movies show? Zuri, no. That's one of the biggest misconceptions people have. Brain probes don't read minds. They detect electrical activity. Then powerful computers analyze those patterns to determine what they might represent, such as the intention to move a hand or the attempt to speak. Amari, so the probe is really acting like a scientific sensor. Zuri, exactly. Think of it like a microphone. A microphone doesn't understand music, it simply detects sound waves. The brain probe doesn't understand thoughts, it detects electrical signals. The computer does the difficult job of analyzing those signals. Amari, that explains why artificial intelligence is becoming so important. If scientists are collecting signals from thousands of neurons every second, there must be an enormous amount of data. Zuri, there is. That's why researchers use advanced computer algorithms and AI to recognize patterns much faster than a human could. Every second, the computer helps transform raw electrical signals into useful scientific information. Amari, so today's technology is really a partnership between biology, engineering, and artificial intelligence. Zuri, exactly. None of those fields could accomplish this alone. When they work together, they allow us to better understand one of the greatest mysteries in existence, the human brain. Amari and Zuri have now reached one of the most fascinating parts of the lesson. Detecting electrical signals is only the beginning. Every second, the brain produces an enormous amount of information, far too much for a human being to analyze manually. This is where powerful computers and artificial intelligence become essential partners in neuroscience. Dialogue. Amari, okay, I think I've got it so far. The brain probe detects electrical activity from neurons, but the probe itself doesn't understand what those signals mean. Zuri, that's right. Think of the probe as a translator's microphone. It captures the conversation, but it doesn't interpret the language. Once those signals leave the brain, they're sent to powerful computers for analysis. Amari, and that's where artificial intelligence comes into the picture? Zuri, exactly. Imagine trying to listen to thousands of people talking at the same time while every conversation is happening in a different room. That's similar to what scientists face when they record activity from thousands of neurons. Amari, a human couldn't possibly sort through all of that information fast enough. Zuri, no. That's why researchers use advanced computer algorithms and artificial intelligence. AI can recognize patterns in enormous amounts of data much faster than people can. It begins finding relationships between different electrical signals and what the person is actually trying to do. Amari, so if someone is thinking about moving their hand, the computer starts recognizing the unique electrical pattern that appears before the hand would normally move. Zuri, exactly. After observing those patterns many times, the AI becomes better at predicting what the brain is trying to accomplish. That's how some brain-computer interfaces allow people with paralysis to move a cursor, operate a robotic arm, or select letters on a screen using only their thoughts. Amari, that's incredible. The computer isn't reading someone's private thoughts, it's learning to recognize specific patterns connected to certain actions. Zuri, that's an important difference. Scientists design these systems to identify patterns related to specific tasks, not to read every thought inside someone's mind. Amari, so the process works like this. Neurons create electrical signals. The brain probe detects those signals. The computer converts them into digital information, and artificial intelligence helps identify meaningful patterns. Zuri, exactly. It's a perfect example of biology, engineering, computer science, mathematics, and artificial intelligence all working together to solve problems that once seemed impossible. Amari, and every improvement scientists make brings them one step closer to helping people regain movement, communication, and independence. Zuri, that's why discoveries like this matter so much. They're not just technological achievements, they're opportunities to improve human lives. As Amari and Zuri continue their lesson, they discover something that transforms today's discussion from fascinating science into something deeply human. Brain-computer interfaces are not being developed simply to prove that advanced technology is possible. Their greatest purpose is to help people regain abilities that disease, injury, or neurological disorders have taken away. For many patients, this research represents hope. Dialogue. Amari, everything we've learned so far has been incredible, but this is the part that really matters to me. It's one thing to invent amazing technology, it's another thing to use that technology to improve someone's life. Zuri, I feel the same way. Imagine waking up one day after a spinal cord injury and no longer being able to move your arms or legs. Your mind is still thinking, but your body can't respond the way it used to. Amari, that must be incredibly frustrating. You know exactly what you want to do, but your brain's instructions can't reach your muscles because the communication pathway has been damaged. Zuri, that's where brain-computer interfaces become so important. Scientists are working on ways to capture those brain signals before they reach the damaged pathway. Then a computer can translate those signals into actions. Amari, so instead of the signal traveling through an injured spinal cord, it could control another device? Zuri, exactly. Researchers have already demonstrated systems that allow some people with paralysis to move robotic arms, control computer cursors, type messages, and even perform simple everyday tasks using their brain activity. Amari, that's incredible. It's almost like building a new bridge around a damaged road. Zuri, that's a perfect way to think about it. The brain is still creating the message. Scientists are simply building another route for that message to travel. Amari, I also noticed the technology could help people who have lost the ability to speak. Zuri, yes. Some brain-computer interface systems are being developed to recognize brain activity related to speech. Instead of spoken words coming out of the mouth, a computer may translate those signals into text or even a synthesized voice. Amari, imagine someone being able to tell their family, "I love you" again after years of being unable to speak. Zuri, That's why this research is so meaningful. Behind every scientific breakthrough is a real person hoping for a better quality of life. Amari, this lesson is teaching me that the greatest purpose of science isn't simply discovering new things. It's using knowledge to reduce suffering, restore independence, and give people hope. Zuri, exactly. When science is guided by compassion, it becomes one of humanity's greatest tools for making the world a better place. As Amari and Zuri continue their journey into neuroscience, they discover that brain-computer interfaces are not limited to helping people with paralysis. Researchers around the world are exploring how this technology could improve the lives of people living with many different neurological disorders. Although many of these treatments are still being researched and refined, the possibilities continue to grow with every new discovery. Dialogue. Amari, before today's lesson, I thought brain probes were designed mainly for people with paralysis. I had no idea scientists believed this technology could help with so many other conditions. Zuri, I was surprised too. The human brain controls almost everything we do. So when something affects the brain or nervous system, it can influence movement, speech, memory, emotions, or even how we experience pain. Amari, let's start with Parkinson's disease. I know it causes shaking and difficulty controlling movement, but how could brain technology help? Zuri, some people with Parkinson's already benefit from a treatment called deep brain stimulation, or DBS. Doctors place tiny electrodes into carefully selected areas of the brain. Those electrodes deliver controlled electrical pulses that can reduce symptoms like tremors and stiffness. Scientists are now researching ways to make these systems even smarter by using advanced brain-computer technology. Amari, so instead of simply sending the same signal all the time, future systems might respond to what the brain is doing in real time? Zuri, exactly. That's one of the goals researchers are working toward. Amari, what about epilepsy?
Zuri, that's another exciting area of research.
Some experimental systems can detect unusual patterns of brain activity that may happen before certain seizures. The hope is that earlier detection could eventually help doctors respond more quickly or improve treatment strategies for some patients. Amari, that's incredible. It shows that understanding brain signals isn't just about movement. It could also help doctors understand when something abnormal is happening. Zuri, right. Researchers are also studying brain-computer technology to better understand conditions like ALS, stroke recovery, chronic pain, and other neurological disorders. Some of these approaches are already being tested, while others are still in development. Amari, I noticed something interesting. Every example we've discussed today has the same goal. Zuri, helping people live healthier, safer, and more independent lives. Amari, exactly. The technology may be different for each condition, but the purpose is always the same, using science to improve the quality of life for human beings. Zuri, that's one of my favorite things about medicine. Every new discovery gives researchers another opportunity to reduce suffering and create hope where there once seemed to be very few options. Amari, it reminds me that science isn't only about asking difficult questions. It's also about finding compassionate answers. The more Amari and Zuri learn about brain-computer interfaces, the more they realize that every great invention brings new responsibilities. Throughout history, powerful discoveries have improved human civilization, but only when people chose to use them wisely. As brain technology continues to advance, scientists, doctors, engineers, lawmakers, and society must work together to ensure these remarkable innovations always serve humanity in ethical and responsible ways. Dialogue. Amari, everything we've learned today has been inspiring, but I've started thinking about something else. Whenever humans invent a powerful new technology, we also have to ask how that technology should be used. Zuri, that's exactly what scientists call ethics. Ethics helps us decide what is fair, responsible, and respectful when using powerful scientific discoveries. Amari, for example, brain-computer interfaces collect information from the brain. That makes me wonder, who owns that information? Zuri, that's one of the biggest questions researchers are discussing today. Brain activity is deeply personal. Scientists are working to make sure that any information collected is protected, kept private, and only used with the person's informed permission. Amari, another question is safety. Before doctors place any medical device inside someone's body, they have to be confident that it's been tested carefully and that the benefits outweigh the risks. Zuri, exactly. That's why new medical technologies go through years of laboratory research, engineering tests, clinical studies, and careful review before they become widely available. Patient safety always comes first. Amari, I also hope these technologies become available to everyone who needs them, not just people who can afford expensive medical treatments. Zuri, that's another important ethical issue, fairness. Medical breakthroughs should improve lives across society. Researchers, healthcare systems, and governments all have roles to play in making sure new treatments become more accessible over time. Amari, and what about the future? As brain technology becomes more advanced, people will probably keep asking bigger questions. Zuri, absolutely. Questions like, how do we protect privacy? How do we prevent misuse? How do we balance innovation with responsibility? Those conversations will continue as the technology develops. Amari, one thing I've learned from this lesson is that great scientists don't only ask, can we build it? Zuri, they also ask, should we build it this way? And how can we use it to help humanity? Amari, that's what makes science truly powerful, not just knowledge, but wisdom. Zuri, exactly. When innovation is guided by compassion, responsibility, and respect for people, science has the power to change the world for the better. Amari, Zuri, when I look at everything we've learned today, I can't stop thinking about what the world might look like 50 years from now. If brain-computer interfaces have advanced this much already, imagine where they'll be by the time we're adults. Zuri, I wonder the same thing. History has shown us that technology can advance very quickly. Think about it. People once believed carrying a computer in your pocket was impossible. Today, billions of people have smartphones. Brain technology could continue improving in ways we can barely imagine. Amari, maybe one day doctors will be able to diagnose neurological diseases much earlier than they can today. Instead of waiting until symptoms become severe, advanced brain monitoring technology might help identify problems while they're still easier to treat. Zuri, that's one possibility researchers hope to achieve. Earlier detection could give doctors more information and potentially help patients receive treatment sooner. Scientists are actively studying ways to improve diagnosis and care. Amari, I also think about people living with paralysis. Right now, we've seen examples of people controlling robotic arms and computer cursors. In the future, those systems could become even faster, more precise, and easier to use. Zuri, maybe someday robotic prosthetic limbs will feel so natural that they respond almost instantly to a person's intentions. Researchers are also exploring ways to improve sensory feedback so users may be able to better perceive touch or pressure through advanced prosthetic technology. Amari, that would be incredible. It wouldn't just restore movement. It could help people regain confidence, independence, and the ability to do everyday things many of us take for granted. Zuri, another exciting possibility is improving communication. Scientists are studying ways brain-computer interfaces might assist people who have difficulty speaking because of neurological conditions. Future systems may become faster and more accurate, allowing people to express themselves more naturally. Amari, but I think the biggest lesson is that technology itself isn't the hero. Zuri, exactly. People are. Technology is simply a tool. It's the scientists, engineers, doctors, programmers, researchers, and patients working together that make these discoveries meaningful. Amari, which means the future isn't already written. Every new generation, including ours, gets the opportunity to shape what comes next. Zuri, and maybe one of the students watching Afro Think Tank University today will become the neuroscientist, the biomedical engineer, the AI researcher, or the doctor who helps create the next breakthrough that changes millions of lives. Amari, that thought makes me excited about learning science. Because every question we ask today could become tomorrow's life-changing discovery. Amari, you know what's amazing, Zuri? The more we study science, the more I realize that some of today's greatest inventions started as someone's imagination. Zuri, that's true. Before airplanes existed, people dreamed about flying like birds. Before astronauts walked on the moon, many people believed space travel would never happen. Imagination often inspires scientists to ask, what if this could become real? Amari, that reminds me of science fiction movies. Sometimes they show incredible technology long before scientists actually invent something similar. Zuri, exactly. But there's an important difference that every scientist should understand. Science fiction is meant to imagine possibilities. Science is about testing ideas, collecting evidence, and proving what actually works. Amari, take smartphones, for example. Decades ago, television shows imagined tiny communicators that people could carry in their pockets. Today, billions of people carry smartphones that let them make video calls across the world. Zuri, or look at robotics. Stories imagined intelligent machines long before engineers built modern robots. Today's robots can assist in factories, hospitals, laboratories, and even help perform delicate surgeries. They're not the same as fictional robots, but they show how imagination can inspire real innovation. Amari, and now we're learning about brain-computer interfaces. Some people immediately think about machines reading every thought inside someone's mind. Zuri, that's where science and science fiction separate. Current brain-computer interfaces do not read every thought like movies sometimes portray. They detect specific patterns of brain activity related to certain tasks or intentions. Scientists are careful not to exaggerate what today's technology can actually do. Amari, so it's important to stay excited about new discoveries without assuming that every fictional idea has already become reality. Zuri, exactly. Good scientists stay curious, but they also stay honest. They ask questions, test evidence, repeat experiments, and change their understanding whenever new evidence appears. Amari, I think that's one of the biggest lessons we've learned today. Imagination gives us ideas. Zuri, but evidence tells us which ideas are true. Amari, and every generation has the opportunity to turn yesterday's dreams into tomorrow's discoveries. Zuri, maybe the next breakthrough won't come from a famous laboratory. Maybe it'll come from a student sitting in a classroom watching Afro Think Tank University who decides to ask one question that nobody else has ever asked before. Amari, because every great scientist starts the same way, by being curious enough to ask, what if? Amari, after everything we've learned today, I've been wondering, who are the people building these incredible brain-computer interfaces? They didn't just wake up one day knowing how to create brain probes. Zuri, that's a great question. Every neuroscientist, engineer, doctor, programmer, and researcher started exactly where every student starts, in a classroom, learning one lesson at a time. Amari, so becoming a neuroscientist isn't about being born a genius? Zuri, not at all. It's about developing curiosity and refusing to stop learning. The greatest scientists in history weren't simply the smartest people in the room, they were often the most persistent. They kept asking questions even after they failed many times. Amari, that makes science feel much more achievable. Sometimes people think scientists are completely different from everyone else. Zuri, they're really not. Scientists are ordinary people who dedicate themselves to understanding extraordinary questions. They spend years studying biology, chemistry, physics, mathematics, computer science, engineering, and medicine, because each subject helps them understand another piece of the puzzle. Amari, so someone interested in brain technology doesn't only study the brain? Zuri, exactly. Think about everything we've discussed today. Building a brain-computer interface requires knowledge from neuroscience, electrical engineering, biomedical engineering, robotics, artificial intelligence, computer programming, materials science, mathematics, and even psychology. That's why teamwork is so important. Amari, I noticed something else. Every scientist we've talked about today seems to have one thing in common. Zuri, what's that? Amari, they all wanted to solve problems that could improve people's lives. Their goal wasn't just inventing something impressive, it was helping someone walk again, helping someone communicate again, helping someone regain hope. Zuri, that's one of the most inspiring parts of science. Knowledge becomes meaningful when it's used to serve humanity. Amari, so if a student watching this episode dreams about becoming a neuroscientist, where should they begin? Zuri, start by asking questions, read books, watch science documentaries, learn mathematics because it's the language scientists use to understand the world. Study biology to understand living organisms. Learn physics to understand how nature works. Explore computer programming because modern science depends heavily on technology and data. Amari, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. Zuri, exactly. Every experiment doesn't succeed. Every scientist experiences failure. The difference is that scientists learn from each mistake and use it to move one step closer to the answer. Amari, that changes the way I think about learning. Instead of being afraid of difficult questions, I should become excited by them. Zuri, because every difficult question is an invitation to discover something that humanity has never known before. Amari, maybe the next great neuroscientist, the next biomedical engineer, or the next inventor of life-changing medical technology is sitting in a classroom right now wondering if they're smart enough. Zuri, if you stay curious, keep learning, work hard, and never give up, you might surprise yourself. Amari, wow. This laboratory is incredible. Before today, I imagined scientists working alone in small rooms, but this place looks like an entire city dedicated to discovery. Zuri, that's because modern neuroscience is a team effort. One person can't master every field required to build brain-computer interfaces. Scientists from many different backgrounds work together every single day. Amari, I can see neuroscientists studying the brain, biomedical engineers designing the probes, computer scientists writing software, and robotic engineers building the machines that place the probes with incredible precision. Zuri, exactly. And don't forget mathematicians who help analyze complex data, physicists who understand electrical signals, chemists who develop new materials, psychologists who study behavior, and doctors who care for patients. Every profession contributes something important. Amari, I never realized how much teamwork goes into a single scientific breakthrough. Zuri, most people only hear about the final discovery, but they don't see the years of planning behind it. Scientists spend thousands of hours designing experiments, collecting data, checking their results, and asking other researchers to review their work. Amari. So science isn't just about making discoveries, it's also about proving that those discoveries are accurate. Zuri, exactly. That's why experiments must be repeated over and over again. If different scientists perform the same experiment and get similar results, everyone becomes more confident that the discovery is reliable.
Amari, I also noticed that nobody here seems to stop learning. Even experienced scientists are reading research papers, discussing new ideas, and questioning their own assumptions.
Zuri, that's one of the greatest strengths of science. Scientists don't claim to know everything. They're willing to change their understanding whenever new evidence appears. That's how knowledge continues to grow. Amari, I think that's a lesson everyone can use. Not just scientists. Never stop learning, never stop asking questions, and never assume you already know everything. Zuri, exactly. Curiosity is what drives discovery. Every major medical breakthrough began with someone asking a question that nobody had answered before. Amari, looking around this laboratory, I don't just see machines and computers. I see thousands of people working together with one shared goal: helping humanity live healthier, longer, and better lives. Zuri, and that's what makes science so inspiring. It's not just about understanding the world, it's about improving it. Amari, after everything we've learned, someone might think scientists have already solved every problem. But looking at this panel, I can tell there's still a lot of work left to do. Zuri, that's one of the most important lessons in science. Every breakthrough answers some questions, but it also creates new ones. Brain-computer interfaces have made incredible progress, yet researchers are still working to overcome many challenges before these technologies become available to more people. Amari, what's one of the biggest challenges? Zuri, one major challenge is long-term reliability. A brain probe has to work safely for many years inside one of the most delicate organs in the human body. Scientists are studying better materials that can remain stable while reducing irritation to surrounding tissue. Amari, that makes sense. If a medical device is going to stay inside someone's body for a long time, it has to be dependable and as safe as possible. Zuri, exactly. Another challenge is improving the quality of the signals. Brain activity changes constantly. Researchers are developing more sensitive sensors and better computer algorithms so they can distinguish meaningful neural signals from background activity. Amari, so the computer has to figure out which electrical signals matter and which ones are simply normal brain activity. Zuri, that's right. The more accurately the system can recognize patterns, the more useful it becomes for helping patients. Amari, I also noticed another challenge: cost. New medical technology can be expensive when it's first developed. Zuri, that's true. Scientists, engineers, manufacturers, healthcare systems, and policymakers all want to find ways to make these technologies more affordable over time. A medical breakthrough can help the greatest number of people only if it becomes accessible to those who need it. Amari, I remember we also talked about ethics and privacy. Zuri, those challenges don't disappear as technology improves. Researchers must continue protecting patient privacy, ensuring informed consent, and building systems that people can trust. Scientific progress and ethical responsibility should always move forward together. Amari, you know what I've realized? When most people see a finished invention, they celebrate the success. Scientists see the next challenge waiting to be solved. Zuri, exactly. That's what makes science so exciting. Every solution becomes the starting point for another discovery. Amari, so instead of saying, "We're finished," scientists ask, "What's the next problem we can solve?" Zuri, and that's why human knowledge keeps growing, from one generation of curious minds to the next. Amari, You know something I've noticed throughout this lesson? Every major breakthrough we've talked about wasn't made by just one person working alone. Zuri, that's because modern science is one of the biggest team efforts in human history. The brain is so incredibly complex that no single scientist or even one country has all the answers. Progress happens when researchers share ideas, compare discoveries, and learn from one another. Amari, so a scientist in one country might discover something that helps scientists somewhere else make an even bigger breakthrough? Zuri, exactly. Imagine a researcher in Japan developing a better brain sensor. Scientists in Germany might improve the materials it's made from. Engineers in the United States could create better software to analyze the signals. Doctors in South Africa might discover new ways to use that technology to help patients. Researchers in Brazil or India could contribute new ideas that make the entire system even better. Amari, that's amazing. Instead of competing all the time, they're building on each other's discoveries. Zuri, that's one of the strengths of science. Research is often published so scientists around the world can examine the results, repeat the experiments, and improve upon them. Every discovery becomes another stepping stone for future discoveries. Amari, it reminds me of building a giant bridge. One person lays the first stones. Another builds the supports. Someone else strengthens the foundation. Eventually, thousands of people have contributed to something none of them could have completed alone. Zuri, that's a perfect example. The biggest scientific achievements belong to humanity, not to one individual. Every generation adds another piece to the puzzle. Amari, I also like seeing scientists from different cultures and backgrounds working together. Everyone brings different experiences, different ways of solving problems, and different ideas. Zuri, exactly. Diversity isn't just good for society, it's also good for science. Different perspectives often lead to creative solutions that nobody would have discovered alone. Amari, so when scientists collaborate across the world, patients around the world benefit too. Zuri, that's the goal. Science doesn't recognize borders when it comes to improving human health. Whether someone lives in Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, South America, or anywhere else, everyone deserves the opportunity to benefit from medical discoveries. Amari, that might be one of the biggest lessons in today's episode. The human brain belongs to all of humanity. Understanding it is something we accomplish together. Zuri, and when we share knowledge instead of keeping it to ourselves, everyone becomes stronger. That's how science helps move the entire world forward. Amari, you know, Zuri, when we first started this lesson, I thought brain science was something that only mattered to doctors and scientists, but now I realize it affects every single one of us. Zuri, it really does. Every time you learn something new, solve a problem, remember a birthday, feel happy, feel nervous, or make a decision, your brain is working behind the scenes. Neuroscience isn't just about studying diseases, it's about understanding what makes us who we are. Amari, so even students can use neuroscience in everyday life. Zuri, absolutely. Scientists who study the brain have discovered that getting enough sleep, exercising regularly, eating nutritious foods, managing stress, and practicing new skills all support healthy brain function. While researchers are still learning exactly how these factors interact, they know our daily habits can influence how well our brains perform. Amari, that means studying isn't just about reading a book. It's also about taking care of the brain that's doing the learning. Zuri, exactly. Think of your brain like the world's most advanced computer. Even the best computer needs good care to perform at its best. Your brain benefits from healthy habits that help it stay ready to learn and adapt. Amari, I've also heard that the brain can change as we learn new things. Zuri, that's called neuroplasticity. It means the brain can reorganize and strengthen connections as we gain new experiences and practice new skills. Scientists are still studying all the ways this happens, but it's one reason learning throughout life is so important. Amari, so every time I practice math, learn a new language, play a musical instrument, or solve a difficult science problem, I'm helping my brain build stronger connections. Zuri, that's the idea. Practice helps the brain become more efficient at many tasks. It doesn't happen overnight, but with time and repetition, learning can become easier. Amari, that changes the way I think about making mistakes. Instead of seeing mistakes as failures, I can see them as part of the learning process. Zuri, exactly. Every scientist, engineer, athlete, artist, and musician has made mistakes while learning. The important thing is to keep practicing and keep asking questions. Amari, so this lesson isn't just about tiny brain probes anymore. It's about understanding the incredible brain that every one of us already has. Zuri, And that's the most inspiring part. Whether you dream of becoming a scientist, an engineer, a teacher, a doctor, or something completely different, your brain is your greatest tool for building that future. Amari, the more we understand our brains, the better prepared we are to understand ourselves, help other people, and create a brighter future for humanity. Throughout this journey, Amari and Zuri have discovered that every great scientific achievement began with a simple question. The people developing brain-computer interfaces today were once children who wondered how the world worked. They became scientists, engineers, doctors, programmers, inventors, and educators because they never stopped asking questions. The future of neuroscience and every other scientific field will be shaped by the next generation. Perhaps one of those future innovators is watching this lesson right now. Dialogue. Amari, Zuri, after everything we've learned, I've realized something. The scientists building these incredible brain-computer interfaces weren't born knowing how to do this. They had to learn just like us. Zuri, exactly. Every Nobel Prize winner, every inventor, every neurosurgeon, every engineer, every programmer, every researcher started exactly where we are today. Sitting in a classroom, learning one lesson at a time. Amari, that makes science feel much less intimidating. Sometimes people look at brilliant scientists and think they're just naturally gifted, but they don't see the thousands of hours those scientists spent reading, practicing, making mistakes, learning from failures, and refusing to quit. Zuri, that's one of the biggest myths about success. Most breakthroughs don't happen because someone is magically smarter than everyone else. They happen because someone stays curious longer than everyone else. They keep asking questions after everyone else has stopped. Amari, so the future doesn't only belong to people with the highest grades. It belongs to people who keep learning. Zuri, exactly. Curiosity, discipline, patience, hard work, and compassion. Those qualities often matter just as much as intelligence. Amari, I also noticed something while looking around this futuristic laboratory. Not everyone here has the same job. Some are doctors, some are programmers, some design robots, some study biology, some analyze data, some teach students. Everyone contributes something different. Zuri, that's because changing the world requires many different talents. You don't have to become a neuroscientist to improve humanity. Maybe you'll become an engineer who builds better medical equipment. Maybe you'll design artificial intelligence that helps doctors diagnose diseases. Maybe you'll become a teacher who inspires future scientists. Maybe you'll invent something no one has even imagined yet. Amari, that's exciting. It means every student has something valuable to contribute. Zuri, exactly. Science isn't a club for a few special people. Science belongs to everyone who is willing to learn, ask questions, and work hard. Amari, maybe one day someone watching Afro Think Tank University will discover a cure for a disease, or invent a safer brain-computer interface, or create technology that changes millions of lives. Zuri, and maybe they'll remember that their journey didn't begin in a giant laboratory. It began with curiosity, one lesson, one question, one dream. Amari, that's what gives me hope. The future isn't waiting for someone else to build it. The future is waiting for us. Amari, can you believe it, Zuri? It feels like yesterday we were sitting in this classroom asking, what is a neuron? Now imagine us years from now walking into our own neuroscience research laboratory. Zuri, I love thinking about that. People often imagine scientists spending all day mixing chemicals or staring into microscopes, but being a neuroscientist is much more exciting than that. Every morning starts with a new question waiting to be answered. Amari, the first thing we'd probably do is meet with our research team. We'd talk about yesterday's discoveries, review new information from laboratories around the world, and decide which experiment we're going to perform next. Zuri, exactly. Science is constantly changing. Researchers read new scientific papers almost every day because someone, somewhere in the world, may have discovered something that helps everyone move forward. Amari, then we'd begin our experiments. Maybe we'd test a new brain probe that's even smaller, or improve an artificial intelligence system that recognizes brain signals more accurately, or design a robotic tool that helps surgeons perform delicate procedures more safely. Zuri, and every experiment teaches us something. Sometimes the results match our predictions. Sometimes they completely surprise us. Either way, we've learned something valuable. Amari, then comes one of the most important parts, checking the data. Because scientists don't make conclusions based on guesses. They look at the evidence. Again, and again, and again. Zuri, exactly. If the evidence doesn't support your idea, you don't ignore the evidence, you change your idea. That's one of the greatest strengths of science. Truth matters more than pride. Amari, after analyzing the data, we'd probably meet with engineers, doctors, computer programmers, and other specialists. Because solving big problems requires many different kinds of expertise. Zuri, that's why teamwork is one of the most valuable skills a scientist can develop. No one discovers everything alone. Every person brings unique knowledge that helps move the project forward. Amari, then, before going home, we'd publish what we learned. Not because we want attention, but because sharing knowledge helps scientists everywhere continue building on our discoveries. Zuri, and the best part? Tomorrow we'd come back, ask another question, run another experiment, and move humanity one tiny step closer to understanding the most amazing organ in the known universe. Amari, that's the life I'd love to live, not because I want to be famous, but because I want to spend my life helping people. Zuri, and that's the heart of every great scientist, not just discovering new knowledge, but using that knowledge to make life better for others. As the lesson begins to draw toward its conclusion, Amari and Zuri realize that science is about more than inventions and discoveries. Every generation builds upon the work of those who came before it. The books we read, the medicines we use, the computers we carry, and the technologies that improve our lives all exist because someone somewhere chose to ask a question and refused to give up searching for the answer. One day, today's students will become tomorrow's teachers, doctors, engineers, inventors, and scientists. The legacy they leave behind may inspire generations they will never even meet. Dialogue. Amari, Zuri, I keep thinking about something. Most of the scientists we've talked about today probably never met the millions of people whose lives they eventually changed. Zuri, that's one of the most beautiful things about science. A discovery made today can continue helping people hundreds of years from now. Many of the scientists whose work we depend on never lived to see the full impact of what they started. Amari, it's almost like planting a tree. You may never sit under its shade, but future generations will. Zuri, exactly. Knowledge works the same way. When one scientist makes a discovery, another scientist improves it. Then another generation builds something even better. Human knowledge grows because people choose to share what they've learned instead of keeping it to themselves. Amari, that means we're surrounded by invisible gifts from the past. Electricity, modern medicine, vaccines, computers, satellites, the internet, medical imaging, artificial intelligence. None of those things appeared overnight. Thousands of people contributed to them over many generations. Zuri, and one day, future generations may look back at today's neuroscientists the same way we look back at the great inventors and scientists of history. The work being done today on brain-computer interfaces could become the foundation for medical treatments that save lives decades from now. Amari, that really changes the way I think about success. Success isn't only about becoming famous. Sometimes success means making life a little better for people you'll never meet. Zuri, exactly. A teacher leaves behind educated students, a doctor leaves behind healthier patients, an engineer leaves behind safer technology, a scientist leaves behind new knowledge. Every person has the opportunity to leave the world better than they found it. Amari, so the real question isn't, will I become famous? The real question is, what kind of difference will I make? Zuri, that's the question every great scientist asks. How can my knowledge, my skills, my compassion, and my hard work improve life for someone else? Amari, maybe that's the greatest discovery of today's lesson. The most powerful legacy we can leave behind is helping other people build an even better future. Zuri, and every great legacy begins with a single question, a curious mind, and the courage to keep learning. Amari and Zuri have reached the final challenge before graduating from today's science lesson. Throughout this journey, they explored neurons, brain probes, artificial intelligence, robotics, ethics, teamwork, and the future of neuroscience. But knowledge alone is never enough. The greatest discoveries in history were made by people who chose to act on their curiosity. The future of science will not be shaped by machines alone. It will be shaped by young people who ask bold questions, think critically, work together, and never stop learning. Today's lesson now becomes tomorrow's challenge. Dialogue. Amari, we've learned so much today. How neurons communicate, how brain-computer interfaces work, how engineers build tiny probes, how artificial intelligence helps scientists understand brain signals. But I think we've reached the most important question of all. Zuri. And what's that? Amari, what are we going to do with everything we've learned? Knowledge is powerful, but it only changes the world when someone decides to use it. Zuri, I couldn't agree more. Every scientist we've talked about started with one decision. They chose to stay curious, they chose to keep learning, and they chose not to give up when the work became difficult. Amari, that means the future isn't something that simply happens to us. We help create it through the choices we make every single day. Zuri, exactly. Every time you ask a thoughtful question, every time you read a new book, every time you solve a difficult problem, every time you help another person understand something, you're preparing yourself to make a difference. Amari, sometimes young people think, I'm just one person, I can't change the world. But history tells a different story. Every famous inventor, every great scientist, every groundbreaking engineer, every inspiring teacher started as one curious young person. Zuri, that's right, no one is born knowing everything. Greatness isn't about already having all the answers. It's about having the courage to keep searching for them. Amari, so our challenge isn't to become famous. Our challenge is to become lifelong learners, people who never stop asking, why? How? What if? Zuri. And when we combine curiosity with kindness, knowledge with humility, and intelligence with compassion, that's when science becomes one of the greatest forces for good in the world. Amari, so here's my challenge to everyone watching Afro Think Tank University. Don't be afraid to ask difficult questions. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to dream bigger than anyone expects. Zuri, because the next great medical discovery, the next life-saving invention, the next revolutionary scientific breakthrough may begin with someone who's watching this lesson today. Amari, including you. Zuri, the future isn't waiting for superheroes. It's waiting for curious minds, determined hearts, and people who believe they can make tomorrow better than today. Amari. Wow. What an incredible journey. When this lesson started, I thought we were simply going to learn about tiny brain probes. Now I realize we learned something much bigger. We learned how science changes lives. Zuri, we really did. We discovered that every breakthrough starts with curiosity, grows through education, becomes stronger through teamwork, and succeeds because people refuse to give up when problems seem impossible. Amari, we learned that the human brain is one of the most extraordinary creations in the known universe. Scientists are still discovering new things about it every single year. That means there are still thousands of questions waiting for future generations to answer. Zuri, and that's exciting, because it means discovery isn't finished. Science isn't complete. There are still diseases to understand, technologies to invent, problems to solve, and lives to improve. Amari, maybe one day, one of the students watching this episode will become the neuroscientist who develops an even safer brain-computer interface, or the engineer who invents a technology we can't even imagine today, or the doctor who helps millions of patients recover from neurological diseases. Zuri, or maybe they'll become a teacher who inspires another generation of scientists. Because changing the world doesn't always happen in a laboratory. Sometimes it begins in a classroom. Sometimes it begins in a conversation. Sometimes it begins with one person encouraging another person to never stop learning. Amari, that's probably my favorite lesson of all. No matter where you come from, no matter how old you are, no matter what challenges you face, you have the ability to learn something new every single day. Zuri, and every new thing you learn becomes another tool you can use to improve your life, help your family, strengthen your community, and make the world a better place. Amari, so here's our graduation challenge for everyone watching. When this episode ends, don't let your curiosity end with it. Read another book, ask another question, explore another idea, build something, experiment, imagine, create. Zuri, because the future isn't built by people who think they already know everything. It's built by people who never stop learning. Amari, thank you for joining us for another amazing lesson here at Afro Think Tank University. Zuri, we'll see you in the next adventure, where we'll ask even bigger questions, explore even bigger ideas, and continue discovering the incredible world of science together. Amari and Zuri, until next time, learn something, teach something. Thanks for learning with Afro Think Tank University. Keep thinking, Keep asking questions and we'll see you in the next lesson.